I'd like to welcome today my good friend and former fellow co-worker, Justin Fowlkes. Yay, clapping. And so Justin, you, as far as I know, you have not been to any of the meetings yet, unless you went to one that I didn't go to. So maybe our fellow Detoxifying Masculinity members and the public need to know who you are. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Well, I am Justin Fowlkes. I am a former musician turned computer scientist, and I currently reside in Jersey City. And I've been in the New York City metro area for about 10 years now, going on 11.
When we met, Justin and I were peers, and then he became my supervisor. And I remember one time you had to answer the question of, like, if you had to fire someone, or you did have to fire someone, and how did that go down? Because I remember you being a very compassionate person, and where do you see the intersection of compassion and masculinity?
I think it's all one kind of like fluid river. To separate into, you can either be compassionate or masculine, I think is one way to look at it, but maybe not one of the better ways of looking at it, one of the healthier ways of looking at it. It tends to pigeonhole people into, oh, I have to do this in order to be this. For example, in a situation like that, I think you always have to, if you're in a position of management or even, working with peers, you always have to take everything from a place of compassion. You always have to take it from a place of humility. With that, if you do have to, do something that is life-changing for someone else possibly, you have to be compassionate, but you also have to find a means to look at it objectively and to also give that person the opportunity to play a part in what's going on. And by that, I mean setting expectations, laying the cards on the table in a way that is polite, understandable, and an open dialogue. No one needs to be in charge per se in a conversation between two people. The important thing is understanding what's going on, and understanding and coming to an understanding between the two people. So I think that to say masculinity and being compassionate, I think that is a slippery slope, because most people, when they hear masculinity, they think domineering. They think, having to have control, having to assert yourself, having to be aggressive, having to lord authority and power. If you do your job correctly, that's not the case.
When we were discussing how you wanted to approach this conversation today, one of the first things you said was about the invisible contracts that society has. Do you want to expand on that a little bit? To read the whole thing, is that, quote, I think society has a lot of invisible contracts on the role of men that many feel obligated to fulfill in certain ways, and it's rarely unpacked. How about unpacking those?
Well, I think, for example, that what we were just talking about, and that concept goes hand in hand. If, for example, the stereotype of men in power is that, you have that masculine presence, you have an embodiment of power and authority. Whenever, men are in a place of leadership, in a place of authority, or, where people depend on them, that is kind of the implicit nature of their role that society places upon them. They're expected to, we need a man in this role because we need someone strong and domineering. We need someone who can spearhead this. And I think that isn't looked at under the microscope as much as it should be. It goes into the good old stereotype of the housewife and the father, right? All the power of punishment and discipline lies with the father. The father is always the ultimate threat. The mother will punish up to a certain point, and then anything beyond that, wait until your father gets home. These are the small kind of things, or, they like to say when it comes to, racism and ethnicity, these are the microaggressions, society that people come across in their day-to-day that kind of very subtly informs how they see themselves and how they see other men and their role in society. And it's not looked at and it's not corrected. The external sources where these microaggressions come from, they're never restructured into a more constructive light to ensure that men feel empowered but not forced or pigeonholed into certain roles. They feel as if they're forced to take certain actions in order to maintain or fulfill the contract that they've made to be where they are, to be a father, to be a CEO, to be a director, to be a manager, to be a husband, or anything like that.
It's interesting that you say all this because, well, no, for me, my parents, even though they've been divorced for as long as I can remember, I also remember as a child, one of them, or maybe both of them, agreeing to this, that my dad was going to be the one who raised me, and he was going to be the disciplinarian, and then my mom was going to be the one who took me on trips and did all the sort of cool stuff with me.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was probably in college by the time I really started to unpack all of that a little bit and think that was really fucked up. And what you're talking about right now, you're talking about two parents who are together and still doing this. Imagine two parents who are separate and who aren't even communicating.
Yeah.
But they had this sort of agreement, like you're the man. I don't know if it came down to you're the man and you're the woman, but my dad raised me, which is unusual. Usually the child will go to the mother, generally speaking. But you're talking about those men who are expected to be spearheaders in the company. What about when a woman is given that position? Do you think it's because she displays traditional masculine traits that they want for those leadership roles, or is she bringing something else to the table? And studies have shown that companies that have an equal balance of men and women on the team tend to do better overall financially. So there's definitely something that women are bringing that is separate, or do you think it's more of the same, just repackaged?
I think it's a very interesting concept when you look at it. For the most part, and this will be a generalization, so I apologize in advance, but there are studies out there. But usually when you find, women in a stereotypically, male-dominated field or role, they adopt, those mannerisms in order to fit in or to be perceived as effective or one of the boys or as an authority or, as a peer or someone worthy of the same amount of respect and authority as a man. So there's a little bit of a, the yin takes on a little yang and the yang takes on a little yang. So it's a little bit of a trade-off that usually people in those high power positions do. And that rarely happens in reverse, with men adopting more quote unquote feminine traits in order to take on a position of power. And it probably should. One thing with those studies that I find interesting is you will most definitely see an increase in financial in revenue and growth with women and more women in positions of power and authority, co-equal with men or just women in general, because that brings another viewpoint and perspective. It brings an entirely different set of ideas and ideals and an entirely different inherent view of social responsibility and compassion, and all that goes down to those invisible roles that men think they could have to fulfill. Most men in power don't believe that they have to be compassionate. They don't believe in social responsibility isn't the role of a man in society, like being cognizant of that. For quote unquote women, it's a quote unquote woman's role to be concerned with compassion and social responsibility and being overly conscientious and making sure everything has been checked and everything's in balance and levels of compromise. And the stereotype of a man in power is more of a sledgehammer to a small nail. those studies are interesting because you see that not only happens with gender, and that also happens with diversity in general. I've read a couple of articles and studies where I think it was the top 100 companies in the world have, I think, 30% more diversity than other companies, and they also make more proportionally. And that's purely because they have the diversity of ethnicity, of background, of ideals, of beliefs. And that means more ideas and more thoughts firing and more conscientiousness. At the end of the day, that leads to more diversity of product, more diversity of idea, being able to handle problems better, being able to come up with better solutions, being able to service customers and employees better, and being able to make better products. I mean, there's no doubt that, more women should be in power. And there's no doubt that, companies should be more diverse. And any company that don't have more women in power and don't have more diverse employees, they're not really doing too well in this day and age. Even the most staunch, financial companies these days are pretty diverse.
Well, now we could go really dark and talk about, what about Congress, where there are like 6 women up there? But let's not do that. Let's go instead in a more positive route, down from the macro to the individual level. Mm-hmm. You talked a little bit ago about how men should be taking on more quote unquote feminine properties in work. And I'd like to extend that to life a little bit as well. What properties are you looking for and actively adapting into your life that might not be traditionally masculine?
Well, I come from a musical theater background, so I feel like I already divide the stereotype a little bit. I don't know. I always try to, on the day-to-day, expand kind of like my emotional intelligence, being able to listen better and listen more closely, to read in between the lines a little bit better. I try to exercise humility, and I say that a lot. I always try to take things from a very humble perspective. There are things that I'm good at, there are things that I know, there are things that I've studied, and that does not mean that, I'm an expert, and that does not mean that I know everything. And there's always the possibility that I may be wrong. And I welcome people to show me how I'm wrong, and that's how I make myself better, and that's how I make myself grow. A lot of people, if they keep that need to domineer or to be at the top or to be the best, or to have to be right all the time, then that's something that they never experience, and then you wind up with a cognitive dissonance where you think you're always right and you think you always should be right, and then reality is telling you something different and you don't know how to deal, and then that causes emotional friction and usually problems amongst in your social circle and the way that you interact with people throughout your day-to-day and in society.
So this might be something that should be discussed and explored in a Detoxifying Masculinity event, where they have their own non-disclosure agreement. What happens at the meeting stays at the meeting. It's a lot of sort of internal work. We let loose with our feelings. It's an open space to really talk about anything. So maybe this isn't the time for this, but if you're interested in exploring it, for you, Justin, where did these images, these negative masculine images, first arise in your life?
I think, childhood, of course. I was athletic, but I had no interest in sports at all. And, I have always been the artist. My family loves R&B, and my brother was a rapper, and I like musical theater and rock music. And always, from a child of an early age to now, I've always felt different to my environment. And I think when you feel different from your environment, especially, if you're gay, you always have that feeling of otherness or not belonging. You start to realize that the picture of yourself as you are don't match what other people perceive you need to be or what society wants you to be. and you start to see the mirror starts to crack and you slowly see that, these are two completely different people. As a kid who liked to sit in the art room, and I was supposed to want to play football as a child, which I did, and I got a touchdown, and it was great, except for I went the wrong direction. It was for the other team.
It's a touchdown. In my little gay book, it's a touchdown.
Exactly. But, just, family expectations and societal expectations, you just start to notice those things. And, that feeling just creeps in on you of not fitting in and not fulfilling your role, of, not fitting the mold you were meant to fit. And there's a sense of disappointment, that you're somehow disappointing someone, that creeps in on you. So that's kind of like, growing up, how I knew I had eating issues and, near to an eating disorder. And men aren't supposed to have eating disorders, and men aren't supposed to care about how they look, or, how fat they are, or how skinny they are, or, what they look like. And growing up, I was very small, and then puberty hit, and then I magically grew to like 6 foot. And I somehow went from the smallest person in school to the largest person in school. And I was a big boy at the time too. I constantly had this sensation that I needed to shrink myself because I didn't fit in, and even to this day, I feel like a lumbering idiot. Wherever I go, I'm a bull in a china shop. Part of that's because I'm not the biggest man, the tallest man alive, but I feel like, compared to a lot of people, compared to women, compared to a lot of men, I'm of a larger stature. So, I have to kind of, shrink myself to fit in, to like let other people be at ease, to
Now this is very interesting, because we have spent so much time together, both on a professional level, but also on a personal level. I have always thought of you as a very calm, serene person. Now, do you feel that's a mask you wear to make others more comfortable? Is that not your natural state?
It's my natural state now. Growing up, I was a hellraiser. I was the firecracker, the stereotype of an unruly child. I cussed out teachers. I told people, where they can go stick it. I told nothing but the unabashed truth. And then I leveled out somewhere in high school and became very calm and level-headed, and which I think is a better move. I like to say that that's my neutral. You have to read the room. You have to pick and choose who you can joke with, who you can play with, who you can laugh a little bit louder with. You have to know, what's appropriate so that other people can, again, feel at ease. One thing that I'm no expert in this at all. One thing that I struggle with is finding that balance of where can I live to my fullest and where can I let other people live to their fullest. I find that there's usually a struggle where if other people live too loud, that means other people can't. In my mind, I'm literally always measuring and always balancing and, figuring out what is the appropriate. Can I turn it to a 9? Do I have to turn it back down to a 6? Can I put it to a 7? Can I?
I think it's a little bit like we're both gamers, and if you ever play board games with Justin, he is a killer, so do be careful. But it's a little bit like that, everybody needs to get a turn to be able to do what they're going to do. They might not win, they might not make the best move, but you have to let them make their move.
Yep. And also at a certain point, I kind of realized that it's a little bit of, I want to listen more. I want to hear what other people are saying versus, I know what I'm saying. I have an inner monologue that goes constantly. I always have something to say for the most part. There's always something that I'm thinking. I want to know what you're thinking. I want to know what's going on with you. I want to hear your thought process. I want to hear your thought process so I can measure it against my thought process so that I can grow. So that I have, a means of comparing myself against. So I, can make adjustments to myself so that I can fine tune the way that I do things and try to do it a little bit better each time, which I think works pretty well. I mean, lots of people come to me for for listening and with problems and advice. And
See that? And how about this little factoid that I just picked up? So it
Oh.
sounds to me like you have the same thing that I do. We have this other voice in our head that we talk to all day long. Is that true? Am I getting that?
Yeah.
Apparently, that is not a thing for everyone. There are a lot of people out there who don't talk to themselves. They're like, they might feel an emotion every now and then. It sort of washes over them, and that's about it. It's completely alien to me.
I find that so strange. Apparently, they see things in colors and pictures. Like there is no dialogue. And then I saw an article, and I immediately thought to myself, are these the same people who have to read a book out loud, or who have to sing a song out loud because they can't sing it in their head, and they can't read the book in their head, so they have to constantly, like, read it out loud as they process it? I would be curious to know that. Every morning, sometimes I wake up and, I'm deep in thought. I'm thinking about the things that I have to do today, doing work, processing everything, thinking about friends, texting people. Sometimes literally I leave my house, it will be 3 or 4 p.m. and then I'll go to get a coffee, and then I open my mouth to order it, and I sound so strange to myself because I've gone the entire day without speaking. And this is the first thing I've uttered in probably 6 hours of being awake. How do those people express their emotions? Because for me, I'm a very cerebral person. I have strong feelings, but I always try to rationalize them. Why am I feeling this way? Why am I affected this way? Is this really, what happened? And these are things that I think about silently to myself. When something happens to people who don't have an inner monologue, how do they process it? They can't talk to themselves. Do they talk aloud? Do they just feel strong emotion? And they just have to do something to alleviate their emotion. And then that's how they cope. You know how some people are very passionate and very impulsive, like when they're upset? Are those the same people that don't have an inner monologue? Because they can't talk themselves out of doing something rash internally. Are they more impulsive?
I've very recently started to sort of give into some of my emotions a little bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But even then, I'm still very controlled. I found that, I can't remember what the exact name of the therapy is, but it's a therapy where you are allowed to essentially break things. Like you break plates, you break glasses.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to go to one.
Oh yeah, I personally loved it. I personally love it, and I sort of love the control of it. Oh, Preston, I'm allowing you to do this thing in this moment. I'm allowing you to sort of give into this primal urge. For me, it's quite thrilling. Do you think there are primal urges that are inherently, to bring the topic back into our main umbrella here, do you think there are primal urges like that, or ways of dealing with emotions that are inherently masculine, and in follow-up a little bit, are masculine and positive?
Yes. I say hesitantly. I think that there are most definitely primal emotions, and there are most definitely, things that people need, things that people feel that are just innate within us when things happen. I think that there isn't anything that's necessarily masculine for me. I think, the stereotype is more aggression is masculine. That's the stereotype. But I think that in general, it's just human. Everything's human, different shades of human.
Well, maybe it would help if we didn't look at all of it. Maybe if we focused in on a single image. What about, say, at a funeral, and how a man might deal with losing someone very close to him, and a woman might deal with someone losing very close to her. And both are actually considered very positive and very valid views in society. And I think the stereotypical view is the woman is going to be openly crying, the man might be shedding like a few tears and just sort of being a little bit more stoic.
I completely agree. I think that's that kind of runs into what I was saying. I think that in general there are, everything's just like, there are primal emotions, there are primal actions, and everything is just human. But society puts everything into how the man is supposed to behave and how the woman's supposed to behave, and those are the the roles of a man and a female at a funeral according to society. That's what's allowed. A man's supposed to be stoic if it's something emotional. If it's anything that is seen as soft, the general consensus is to harden, to be stoic, to be still, and to be steady and dependable and a rock and unfeeling. Whereas that's not the case for the counterpart. If something were to happen, if someone were in danger or something outrageous happened, it's the man's role to be super aggressive and to handle something. Or it's the man's role to control his aggression and wait for the right moment until it's appropriate. There was one, do you know the show, What Would You Do?
I know of it, yes. It's where
So
they have hidden cameras and a scene is enacted repeatedly in the same space with different non-actors around, and it's essentially what are the non-actors doing in response.
So there was this one episode, and I thought it was very telling. They usually do, very poignant situational things, but this one specifically, they were looking for the reaction between men and women. And this took place in Central Park, New York, and they had a couple having a loud argument. And in the argument was the promise of domestic abuse later on. And the man was openly, being belligerent with her. Everyone was looking, everyone was, staring out of the side of their eye, watching the situation. And I think 80% of the time, if there was a woman around, they would always interrupt the situation, and they would always step in, and they would always confront the man, move the woman away, and they would always jump into the situation. There was a man present in the situation. I think 20% of the time they interceded in the interview. And also within the comments, there was a huge difference because, for example, lots of women, mentioned, these men just stood by. I don't understand. Why wouldn't they do something? Every single man who stood there, they kept an eye on the situation, never moved from the area, kept on looking at the man, and they waited for the situation to escalate until it was appropriate for them to step in. And as a man, for me, I've been in a situation like that, and I've had to step in. But I think it's very interesting to see the difference of thinking about a situation where, for example, if I were there, I would perceive it as, there's another man in this situation. If I step up to that man in a volatile situation, it's automatically going to be a fist fight because I'm telling a highly aggressive man what to do. I'm interjecting myself into a situation that already potentially will be violent. If as a man I try to exert control of that situation and I try to move the woman away, there's no guarantee that she would listen to me. There's no guarantee she would go with me because I'm another man, another imposing figure coming into that situation. So it's a very specific way that a male presence in a situation like that is perceived that other women from the comments don't necessarily get. But as a woman, if I were a woman, I would feel much safer walking into that situation because as a man, if that man were to hit a woman interjecting themselves into that situation, then everyone in the park would would jump in. If another woman came up to that woman and said, "Sweetie, you don't need to deal with this. Come with me." It's more likely that she'll go, and they're able to diffuse the situation. It's more acceptable for some of the women got into that man's face and started to cuss him out. That's something that another man going into that situation can't really do unless you want it to be a fist fight. It's not really given enough credit the way that, you know, men are perceived in a lot of the situations in society. And a lot of men process, you know, kind of the weight that their inherent presence gives to situations. Fewer men would step in directly, but they were all standing by ready to jump in if anything happened and ready to tackle the guy. And they all called the police. I've been in situations where I felt as if, as a man, I couldn't lend an opinion or I couldn't jump in because I would be perceived as aggressive, or it would lead to a fight, or, you know, I didn't have the social allowance to speak to a woman or a man, or that if anything did happen, I would, because I'm a larger guy, I would be automatically perceived as, you know, an aggressor, or, you know, a potential problem, or something like that. I've been in situations walking down the street where I've, you know, felt like a kind of a walking weapon. And anyone that knows me, I'm pretty much the most docile person.
I said it before. You are one of the most calm and serene people I know. It's so interesting to hear you talking about this, and I've never really realized it. I think, well, being a gay man myself and sort of always leaning into a more feminine side of myself, because I can even remember as a child, like, people, especially my father, like trying to steer me away from certain things. But it just came naturally to me, so I never really thought about it. But you're absolutely right about the way that men are perceived in this way. And then I'm thinking at the same time, because I have a liberal arts education and all this, and the highest form of fighting sort of like looked upon was like, oh, it's so wonderful. It's supposed to be the bait. It's supposed to be using your words to beat someone else down. And men do not have, by this example, men do not have that ability. They've been stripped of it in favor of being either a silent protector or waiting for a moment that is
the last resort.
Yeah.
The father who will be home later.
Oh my God, and it goes full circle. Now I wonder, did they redo the experiment to see if there was a change, if it depended on the race of the two people, if it depended on if they were both women or if they were both men?
They did not. They just did a male and a female. But they did vary it, I believe, with the level of physical escalation. If it were someone just, you know, in an argument, they wouldn't, people male and female, their reaction went down. But of course, women would interject more. If there was a threat of imminent violence at all, then the rate of men that stepped in went up. If the man started to throw around the woman, or, you know, pushed her, or threatened to punch her visibly, or anything like that, literally every man in the park would stop and walk over. I think it's really interesting. I mean, if something happens in public, we all look. People walk by, but, you know, if we're trip on the sidewalk, we hope no one sees us. People pretend like they didn't see us, and we think we got away with it. But there are people out there watching everything that everyone does. It's really amazing to see a situation like that, how many people notice, how many people are paying attention, and how many people do or don't help or react.
Yeah, because this is, as you said, this is Central Park, New York. New Yorkers, for anyone who might be listening in the rest of the country, the rest of the world, yeah, New Yorkers are pretty much like, we live and let live, and yes, a homeless guy can be shouting on the corner like obscenities, and he can be shitting himself, and we're just walking on by. But we do notice. To varying degrees, we notice. Then think about, if this was happening, I'm trying to give like a sort of an equivalent, because I'm from the South, and you've spent time in the South, or at least you grew up in a more suburban area.
I grew up in Baltimore.
So, well, Baltimore is like a smallish city.
Oh yeah, you could walk through it in an hour.
There you go. Yeah, so more smallish city. If this is okay, let's say if this is taking place in Baltimore, do you think the reactions would have been the same?
I would say so. I would say that that's I would say that that's a very kind of universal, or at least for Americans, that's the very universal role of, how things are supposed to play out. Um, I actually think, and this sounds silly, but I've seen more reactions from, I don't know how to say this politely, so I apologize if I offend people, but I've seen more situations where it had to do with kind of like the people that you think are, the hardcore New Yorker, with the New Yorker accent, an older guy, like, who seems very gruff. I've seen, or like, that Boston kind of frat boy, or, I've seen more situations where people you perceive to be as hyper aggressive, or who would be stereotypically hyper aggressive, where there's a situation where someone disrespects a woman or is on the road to disrespecting a woman, and they step in very aggressively and they stop it immediately under threat of, excuse my language, what the fuck are you doing? I've seen that happen more. I don't think the location per se changes that dynamic. I think that overall, that's just something, if it happened anywhere in America, that's kind of the role that people would fall into, with the only degrees being, how aggressive they let themselves be, or they think that they can be in a situation. Some people don't care and they just want it handled and done. And some people try to take it more tactfully. There are situations you can't talk yourself out of, or you can't de-escalate with words. And then it comes down to how aggressive are you willing to be, which is a crappy situation to be in, a crappy dynamic to be in. But sometimes that's what it comes down to. Are you willing to throw fists in order to rectify the situation? There have been situations where I've been dragged into a near fight. I'm just like, are you serious right now? Are you serious right now? I've had someone, fun story, completely non sequitur. So I went out drinking. There's a McDonald's near my home gay bar. Stopped in for some French fries, and I was getting food for the bartenders.
And how late was this? Because this is going to determine the level of crazy we're dealing with.
It was like midnighty.
Okay, it's still early.
But we get turned up in Jersey City, so people are already wasted. I'm in McDonald's ordering. My food comes up, and this guy and this girl is they're kind of in front of me. This girl just walks up. The lady puts my food on the counter. She's like, here you go. This girl just walks up, puts her hand into my bag, rummages around, takes fries out, and then starts to eat them. And then I'm just like, excuse me. Those are mine. Yeah, I know. They're just so delicious. I just had to take some. Oh. So then I'm like, are you serious right now? Are you serious? You're
Obviously,
just going to
people listening out there. This was pre-COVID days.
Pre-COVID, yeah.
I think if this happened right now, like the entire McDonald's would like stand on their feet.
She'd be in jail. But I'm just like, are you serious? You're just going to put your hand in my food and then laugh about it? Not even aggressive, just like disdain and disbelief. Guess what the reaction was? The guy stepped in, immediately aggressive. Excuse, what you say, bro? What you want, bro? Huh? Like immediately defending the girl. Doesn't care if she's right. Doesn't care if it's wrong. Could have just apologized for her. I'm so sorry. She's drunk. I'll get you another thing of fries. And then, could have completely been fine. I would have been fine. Just apologize, acknowledge you did wrong. But no, a commitment to assholery. That's another critical male, toxic masculine trait. A commitment to assholery. You can't admit you're wrong. You can't back down. You can't reassess the situation. If you're wrong, you just commit onto the road that you're on. It doesn't matter if you're an asshole. You just commit.
And I think it's a cycle. It's not just because it's not just one person. It's everyone around them. It's like gears turning in this clockwork machine of assholery. Sure, the guy's being an asshole, but then the girl's like, if he tries to stop the cog and not be an asshole, the girl is still another cog there, and she's pushing against him, saying, "But what are you? Are you a baby? Are you like a little gonna cry to your mommy when?" And she's like trying to push the cog.
Well, and that also goes into, again, like the invisible contracts that we have, right? There's the good old stereotype of in heterosexual relationships that a woman will go into a bar and start a fight and then say, "Babe, take care of it." That's like a situation.
Yeah. So all of this is that Key and Peele ongoing skit of Megan and Andre.
Exactly. There are lots of people, especially in the male-female dynamic, when it comes to relationships and, coupling and dating, and where there's lots of behavior that isn't socially acceptable. It isn't allowed. And that it's not appropriate. But it's done. All the repercussions are then put on the man to handle. If it's not handled, if it's not taken care of, if it's not taken care of in the right way, if they don't commit to it, then they're somehow less of a man for not being aggressive, for not defending them, even though someone else exhibited improper behavior. As you said, that's kind of like part of the cog work that happens. Something happens. It doesn't matter if it's right or wrong. It's my job to defend them. And then I have to constantly commit to it, or else somehow I'm lesser of a boyfriend, or lesser of a husband, or lesser of a man, or...
And it starts even back before with the mother and the father were probably doing the same things, and then it goes on back and back and back. And what do you think was the progenitor? Do you if you were to hazard a guess, wild theories, even something like aliens or mythological creatures, what have you? Go ahead. What do you think is the progenitor of all of this? What are you blaming?
I blame cavemen. It is most definitely hunter-gatherer, worker, homemaker, caretaker mentality. That's something that we've outgrown societally, socially. These are roles that don't need to be confined to gender anymore, and yet we still try to enforce them and impose them in society, and it causes issues. The hope is that, someone's a well-rounded human being. They grow up with this idea of what they have to be as a man, or to fit into a certain role in society, and then they date or get married, and then they're forced into this archetype of what it means to be a boyfriend or a husband or a wife and a girlfriend. It never goes away. But then we wonder why we have children who have emotional issues, or psychological disparities when it comes to social interactions, or the way that they interact with men or women or people in general, or that they have relationship issues. And we wonder why men can't exercise more compassion. Why is it so hard for men to be vulnerable in society? Maybe it's because society hasn't changed to allow there to be an open forum and an open conversation in order for them to develop that more. There was just a Reddit conversation actually it was someone posted something like, I believe it was a female who posted it, and they said, "Men, I know there's a lot that you carry around with you every day. There's a lot that you don't say, that you can't say, and you feel as if you can't express. Express it down below, anonymously." Because all of Reddit anonymous. The things that are in that Reddit post are heartbreaking. Some of it's, I'm a good friend, I'm a good person, and I constantly do everything for my friends. I would do anything for them. I've given friends money, I've been there through their toughest times, and I feel like that all my friends, they would never do that for me. They don't love me the way that I love them, and they don't appreciate me the way that I appreciate them. I go to bed every night thinking I'm not loved in this world because my relationships aren't as close for them as they are for me. That's heartbreaking, and that's something that should be discussed. Things of how men feel less of men just because they don't want to be a mechanic, or they don't want to play football, or because they cry, or because they're gay, or because they never had a father figure. They're afraid that they don't know how to be a father figure, or all of these literally heartbreaking things that just need to be said in an open forum. One, to know that they're not alone. Two, to have a discussion on how to fix those feelings. They're not being said. Well, they're being said repeatedly in people's head every day, but they're not being said out loud. And if it's not said out loud, then it never goes away.
It's this idea of loneliness, because you know that you're other and just want to be. And I don't know if we've had this discussion, but I hate this word. I hate the word normal.
Mm-hmm.
You're supposed to be normal, and because you're not normal, there's always going to be that barrier between you and them. And you can either wear the mask, you can put on the mechanic's clothes and the football helmet and go out there and be this thing to everyone and try to be everything for everyone, which is exhausting, and it's not who you are. So you're not happy and you're tired all the time, and it's just spiraling. Or you can go out there and supposedly be free by showing people who you really are, and then facing the backlash and the ridicule. And if you're lucky, I think it's probably like 3% of people who ever get to actually do all of that and get highly praised for it. And even then, those people who get highly praised for it, they reach a point where maybe they're at the top of their field or whatever. Maybe they're put into a niche, and because they're in that niche, they're alone again.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, is there any chance I can get somewhere in between? Is somewhere between those two lonely islands happiness?
I mean, but also, we focus on, kind of, not being yourself, right? The mechanic is the facade. All these things is the facade, and you never actually show or express your true self. But then you have people in roles that they hate. They're just dissatisfied with their life. They're dissatisfied with who they are, where they are in the world, what they've gained, and how they gained it. And then you have people who would dream to be in those roles who feel as if they can't. I know so many people who are, for example, gay. They feel as if they can't have those masculine roles. They feel as if they can't be in those masculine jobs. They can't be like an architect or a construction manager or a welder or a mechanic, because those aren't roles for gay men. Those aren't, those can be hobbies, but that's not an appropriate career for a gay man. The few gay men who are in quote unquote hyper masculine professions, they're alone. They're just like how, you have a few women in construction, you have very few gay men or out gay men in construction. You have very few out gay men who are welders or who are contractors, who build houses, who do sanitation, or, things like that. I was reading a special on how there's a gay welder. Everything he does, he literally brands as super, super gay. They have like a union shop where they do work. And he was showing all the workstations, and then you go to his and everything's covered in glitter and rainbow stickers, and he made it obnoxiously gay just to acclimatize everyone to, gay men can be in this field too. If your mind's not open to it and if you're not cognizant of it, then I'm going to make you cognizant of it. No matter what happens, it's as if people handicap themselves. They let the aspect of their masculinity or lack of masculinity to handicap what they can and can't do. Overall, it's a lack of self-worth, self-awareness, self-actualization, not knowing who you are, what you want. And it's fine to not know what you want. It's not fine not to strive towards what you want. It's not fine to make changes towards who you want to be or the life that you want to live in stagnancy, to live in dissatisfaction. So I find that very interesting. Just as if, for example, straight men can't do that, manly men can't do that, masculine men can't do. There are also things that feminine men feel as if they can't do. Gay men feel as if they can't do. It's interesting.
Well, we are technically surpassed the time that we had agreed upon. Thank you so much, Justin, for you're actually the first to do this. So you will be the first episode of the podcast. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. I hope I didn't say anything too earth-shattering.
Well, we shall see. I'm learning new things every day from everyone. Like you said, you just have to listen.
Yep. Thank you, Preston. I appreciate you.
I appreciate you. Again, I'd like to give a special thank you to Justin for being a guest and the very first guest here on Masks of Masculinity. That was Justin Fowlkes, gentlemen and ladies. He is a member of the Detoxifying Masculinity NYC Facebook group, if you care to reach out to him. On the next episode, I'll be speaking with my friend Logan Rollins about the intersections of masculinity and game design. Until then, if you're man enough for you, you're man enough for us.